Hi everyone, my name is Shannon Salter. I am a writer, a poet, a PhD candidate at UNLV, and I'm also an activist and an advocate for the Mojave Desert. And I am out here right now in the South Pahrump Valley. I am halfway in between my rabbit camp and the giant yucca. And I just wanted to get over to the Great Yucca and give you a little reading before heading back to rabbit camp and showing you some more images that I have. So this is the path in between my campground and the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. And of course, the Great Yucca is halfway in between these two places. You can see Mount Charleston there with a nice fresh covering of snow. And we are on the south side of Mount Charleston. So if you have been up to Kyle Canyon or Lee Canyon, you are on the north side. So we're just on the other side of that. And the land that I'm walking on right now is unfortunately slated to become the Purple Sage Solar Project. So the Yellow Pine Solar Project was only the first of many solar projects planned for this valley. And the Purple Sage Energy Project would pick up right where Yellow Pine ends and then continue on for several miles. And then unfortunately there's several other projects there for a total of about 40 square miles, unfortunately. And just walking here, I see a couple tortoise burrows. I can tell this is a tortoise burrow because it's half moon shaped. And that's the shape of its shell. Over here we've got another one. Let's see if anybody's home. Hello! I don't see any tortoise in there, but what I do see is, first of all, there's a little dropping in the foreground. That's a kit fox poop. So we know a kit fox is probably using this burrow. And then I also see a snake skin. So there's a snake that shed its skin around here, looks like. So I better get out of this burrow. That often happens. The tortoises make the burrows and then sometimes other animals move in. So I'm gonna keep on walking over to the giant yucca. Here we are in front of the Great Yucca, just about half a mile from the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. And I've come to think of this Mojave Yucca as a dear friend. I want to just read you the very first paragraph of my essay, Tecopa Road, in this journal. It's published by Nevada Humanities, and it's called Las Vegas Writes. This edition is titled Desert Super Bloom. It begins with a quote by Annie Dillard. She says, "There is a muscular energy in sunlight corresponding to the spiritual energy of wind." When I first came upon the giant yucca off of Tecopa Road, I was walking between rabbit camp and the chain link fence that surrounds the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. The solar facility is being built by a company called Nextera, a subsidiary of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, and one of the biggest energy conglomerates in the world. The rabbit camp was in protest of this godforsaken thing. For 9 months in 2021 and 2022, I lived out there. Every day I went to the fence. I walked the perimeter. I watched them tear the life from one of our last great American frontiers. I was a wild and free person. I walked in a big wash where no one could see me. I sat listening to the diggers and bulldozers and levelers and water trucks. I never felt as free as I did then in that wash. I never felt as close to America. And I want to say that everything in this essay, in this story, is absolutely true. And I did feel absolute freedom being out here, and I still do. But during the 9 months that I was camping out here, living out here, and witnessing the destruction at the Yellow Pine Solar Facility, I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I was a democratic action. I was taking a democratic action outside of the normal democratic process, which I think is actually crucial to maintain a true democracy. And I was engaged in an imaginative action. So I was engaged in what I call poetic action. I was following my own imagination. I was living and acting and just being from my own heart. And that's why I felt so free. And I think that's why I felt so close to America. So, what I hope people get from my writing and what I want to convey in this essay and others like it is a sense of the landscape out here and what's out here, the biodiversity, but also the history of the place and the cultural significance of a landscape that many people don't really know much about and that many people have a hard time seeing, even when they are, in fact, looking at it. So that's what I hope people get from this. And I'm going to now take you back to Rabbit Camp and give you a little more info. Now, to say a little bit more about what I want people to take from my writing about this project, about Tecopa Road and my activist project here, in addition to understanding the landscape and the history and the cultural significance of the land, I hope people see my relationship with the land, because really it's a story about me being here and falling in love with the place. So it's about my experience with the landscape and my developing a relationship with this place. Now, I'd like to give you some information about what I was bearing witness to out here and what I learned, and tell you some more about this concept of poetic action and how my having a campground here and having poetry readings out here and maintaining a presence in this valley was, in fact, a poetry in motion. So, to begin, I want to call attention to the language that we use. Why not put solar in desert valleys? We often say that, should we put the solar facility in this desert or in this desert valley? I want to call attention to the language and point out we should be saying, why should we not replace desert valleys with solar facilities? Or should we replace desert valleys with solar facilities? Because the two cannot coexist, unfortunately. Once a solar facility is built, like Yellow Pine, everything else in the valley is gone. The valley no longer exists. The space of the valley is there, but everything in it has been destroyed. So here's some photos of the Yellow Pine solar site before it was destroyed for the Yellow Pine solar facility. These are a lot of photos that I took in the year 2020. They started doing they really got to work in January of 2022, although the fence was up long before that. But part of my being out here, was to bear witness not only to the destruction, but also to what was being lost. And I wanted to like really see and get a sense of things from my own eyes. So this middle photograph, you can see the Mojave yucca, the creosote. There's a blooming flower bush there. You can see it's very biodiverse and wonderful. You've got a desert tortoise burrow on the right-hand side, and on the left, we've got um, well, this might be reversed for you, actually. I'm not sure. So over here, we've got the cryptobiotic soil crust. That's a really fantastic thing. Not many people pay attention to the desert crust, but it's really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. But here's a beautiful flowering shrub on the solar site. And so, there's tons of bees and moss and insects. It's really an ecosystem that's very much alive. Here's a beautiful photo of Mojave yucca, which these can be hundreds or even like 1,000 years old. The creosote can also be 1,000 years old, and their root systems can be like 10,000 years old. It's really incredible. There were 92,000 Mojave yucca on the Yellow Pine Solar Site that were bulldozed, and there were about 500,000 creosote. Here's a beautiful, very kind of a rare and gorgeous. You can see once you're paying attention, you see these in the desert landscape. This is a barrel cactus. It's a beautiful cactus that was unfortunately destroyed. Here we've got the flowering beaver tail cactus. I love those. You've seen those before. They're vibrant and just lovely. Here's another photo closer up of the cryptobiotic soil crust. So amazingly, the desert soils are actually alive. They are alive with networks of fungus and mycelium. So you can see this black stuff here. That black stuff is fungus. And the soils, the fungus in the soil is actually photosynthetic. It's actually converting energy from the sun into nutrients. And the desert crust is also got, it's got rocks on top, and so it's all packed in. But the soils themselves are actually storing carbon, just like the plants, the yucca and the creosote, et cetera, are storing carbon. And when they are destroyed, then they release the carbon and we get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So that's a big, big problem and a big reason not to build solar in the desert. Now here, so those were some photos before. Here are some photos after. This is the Yellow Pine Solar Site in May. You can see that everything has been bulldozed, and you can see the soil crust is gone. All those rocks holding everything down is gone. You can see dead yucca. You can see this vehicle driving towards us and the dust coming off the ground. And this is before the panels were put on, but the poles were there. So all those poles are going to hold panels. Here is a picture of Mojave yucca being hauled away like trash. So they've been cut out and they're being hauled away. Here's just another photo of I think this technique is called drag and crush. This is the crush technique. This is like where they first go through and just like start to drag stuff out. Again, another photo of, that soil crust being totally gone. Not only is the vegetation gone, but the soil crust is gone. And now we've just got dirt. Here's a drone photo of the site. So as you can see, all of the plants are gone. You can get a sense of how vast it is here. It's about 4.5 square miles, this site, 3,000 acres. And since the soil crust has been removed, now we've got a dust hazard. So all this, poof dirt is on the site and the dust is just flying off. And another sad thing is that once the vegetation has been removed, you get all of this invasive grass growing, and they have to take care of that because it's a fire hazard. And they spray huge amounts of like the most toxic herbicides, like even worse than glyphosate and Monsanto. It's pretty bad. So they have to spray the entire site with herbicide for the entire life of the project to keep the invasive grass out. And since there's such a dust hazard, now we've got to spray the dust down with water. And this is another huge issue. They have to spray about 350,000 gallons of water per day during construction. It equates to about 250 million gallons over the course of the year. It usually it's about 1 to 2 years for construction. And it's a major problem out here in the Pahrump Valley because they're using groundwater, and there's just not very much groundwater. This basin is over allocated. There's been more water rights sold to people than actual water exists. So this is a huge problem. Everybody in Pahrump is really upset and worried about it because when the water's gone, it's gone. So here's just a before and after photo. You see how biodiverse and wonderful the site was before, and this is how it looks afterwards. It's truly a wasteland after it's been, destroyed. This is a desert tortoise outside the Yellow Pine solar site. This is in April of 2024, and the desert tortoises like to come out after the rain, so spring is a great time to see them. This is after the solar panels have been put in. You can see the panels are in place. This is along the fence line of the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. This tortoise might be trying to go back to a burrow that was on site. There were 136 tortoises taken off site and put on the other side of Tecopa Road. About 30 of them were eaten by badgers in the first week. And even though the tortoises were relocated, they want to go back to their burrows. That is what tortoises do. They try to go back. And so she was walking the fence there. This is another desert tortoise that I saw on the same day, right outside the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. And they are unfortunately on the land that has now been allocated for the Purple Sage Energy Project, which we really want to stop. Now, I want to make clear that I'm not against solar. I think solar's awesome, actually. And when I was camping out here, I used my own solar panel every day to charge my battery bank. It was like totally awesome. You know, solar's great. It's like magic is what it is. It's a great thing. My goal here with this activism was to interject in the conversation and make the argument that we need to get off of fossil fuels, but we need to talk about how to build these solar facilities and where to build them. And we do not need to go and destroy wilderness that is storing carbon and providing habitat and providing beauty and solace for people. My solution is to build solar shade canopies over every parking lot in the United States. And amazingly, the US Geological Survey estimates that we could have about 10 million acres of parking lots in the United States. That's about what the Bureau of Land Management wants to permit in the wilderness. Unfortunately, the Western Solar Plan has just been released, opening up about 9 million acres of wilderness, mostly in Nevada, for potential solar development. So, I mean, we're talking about thousands of square miles. But a better way is to put it over the parking lots. Like, I'm thinking about the Walmart parking lots in Las Vegas, those massive parking lots, the UNLV Thomas and Mack Center parking lot. The photo I have on this one here is a gorgeous solar shade facility at the Springs Preserve. I love this one. It was built in just a really beautiful artistic way. I think it's awesome. The other photo is a Walmart parking lot, and that's my brother. It's the Walmart parking lot in Southern California in Huntington Beach. So perfect. And so here is, how I conceive of this poetic action as, in fact, a kind of poetry in motion. And this is a lizard woman. That's me. That's me in my lizard mask in front of the giant yucca, which you just got to see. And I have a quote here from Arthur Rimbaud, a French poet from the 19th century. He says, one must be absolutely modern. And this is kind of a common theme in modern poetry. The American poet Ezra Pound said, make it new, make it new. And that's what poetry is about. It's about seeing with new eyes. It's about speaking a new language. It's about making something new. It's about making a new world, right? To write a poem is to enter a new world. It's to make a new world. And it's about transformation. And so I wrote here, to be absolutely modern is to embrace poetry as a point of action, and the point of action as poetry. To be absolutely modern is to see the world as one piece, to see the self and the other as one piece, to see the human and non-human as one piece, to see the inner workings of things not as mechanical parts, but as truly alive. So this way of seeing would represent a new way of seeing from, how society normally sees the relationship between humans and nature as being separate. So in this way of seeing, it's all of one piece. And we can't destroy wilderness because that's hurting us too, Um, I really love this photo. This is more about this idea of poetic action. And I wrote, poetry is not a process. Poetry is an act. You know what a process leads to and how it ends. You cannot predict the consequences of an act. All true poetry starts out not knowing where it is going or how it is going to get there. It gives itself over to the action. In this way, true poetry is an act of faith. I am engaging in poetic action, the consequences of which I cannot foresee. The moment of poetry and the poetic act are always an entrance to a new world. It is transformation without violence. And in this photo, I'm at a Bureau of Land Management meeting where they're talking about the Green Link transmission line that unfortunately part of which has just been approved that will open up so much Nevada wilderness in the central part of the state to solar development. And I'm taking poetic action here too. I'm giving public comments, but instead of using my 3 minutes to say something, I just stood there for 1 minute in silence, wearing the lizard mask and looking around the room in this lizard mask, which I love, and holding this sign. And you can see this BLM official in the background who just like looks totally confused. And if you could see the absurdity of this meeting, you would just be floored. And you actually could see it because I took a video of this entire meeting and posted it on YouTube. And then later I wrote an article talking about the absurdity of this Bureau of Land Management meeting. And in my article for the Desert Report, I referenced my video that I had posted on YouTube, which I thought was brilliant, I gotta say. But I was, I was meeting absurdity with absurdity here. And I was interjecting in the normal process of things, the normal process. And I knew that there was nothing I could say in those 3 minutes that was going to make any difference. This moment of this 1 minute of silence, I think was impactful and it felt powerful to me. And I think it felt powerful to everybody in the room. And this is really where this concept of poetic action comes from. It's my professor at UNLV, he's just retired. He's an amazing poet named Donald Ravel. Right before I came out here to start my camping, and something that really inspired me, I think, to do it, is he said, poetry is not a process, poetry is an act. Poetry is an action. And basically, he said this. He says, you know how a process is going to end. You cannot foresee the consequences of an act. And that's what a poem does. A poem is about leading you to a new place, leading you to a new world that you can't see. You don't sit down and start to write a poem and say, I know what I'm going to say here. I'm going to write this, and then I'm going to say this, and I'm going to really communicate this. That's not what a good poem is. A good poem leads you into something new that you had no idea about before. It opens up a totally new space. And so that's what this poetic action does too. It opens up a new space. And a poetic action comes from your own imagination. So I was so sick and tired of this democratic process of giving public comments to the Bureau of Land Management. Not to say that you should not engage in the democratic process, you should. And you should also consider ways to interject, I think, into the process, because in some ways, I think this process is broken, unfortunately, and especially with approving these solar projects, because the Bureau of Land Management is just ramming them all through, and they are they're in cahoots with the big companies, and they want it to happen. So I was so sick of doing that. I was so sick of that process, and I knew I wanted to take some action. And then it clicked for me that like I want to take an action that really comes out of my own heart and that really follows my own mind. And I want to do something that I don't know where it will lead me, and I don't know what's going to come of it. So that's what started all this. And so that led me to having the camp out here. And when I was out here at Camp Yellow Pine, also called Rabbit Camp. I thought of this as a vigil, an active witness, and a gathering place. That's what the campground was. It was a camp. It was a place to gather. It was a place to bear witness, and it was a vigil. So I wrote, "This is a form of poetic action in which I am maintaining a presence in this valley." I love the word vigil because it means keeping watch. It also means mourning for what is lost, and it has the connotation of a light in the darkness. The camp is a gathering place, and that is what a poem does. It gathers anything and everything into itself. I really conceive of my time out here as a poem. Sometimes people would say like, "So where's the poetry that you're writing?" And I was like, "No, like this is the poem. Like the camp is the poem." I also was holding poetry readings out here. I was like, our gathering to have the poetry reading, that's the poem. It's like a merge between life and art. I was truly making a poetry in motion. And I love the idea of a gathering place. That's what a campground is. A campground is a gathering place, and that's what a poem does. A poem is like a center of gravity that everything can orbit around, right? And anything can come into its orbit. That's the awesome thing about poetry is anything can happen in a poem. And anything could happen at this campground, and anything could happen with my poetic action and your poetic action. Anything can happen within our imagination. So here's me with the flag. Does this picture have this one doesn't have the flag? Um yeah, here I am with my rabbit flag. The jackrabbit is my mascot, and the organization I made is called Mojave Green, which is a type of rattlesnake, very poisonous rattlesnake. I have a quote by the American poet Walt Whitman, "I could turn and live with the animals." And I sort of was doing that out here. I did turn and live with the animals, and I had a great relationship with the kit foxes and the tarantulas and the dragonflies and the coyote. And I was living a simple, wonderful life out here. There's inside my camper. It was so cozy. So this is at Camp Yellow Pine, aka Rabbit Camp. We've got just people sitting around on the stumps getting ready to have a big campfire after our poetry reading. And so this is I had what I call the Jackrabbit reading series. It's not in the past tense. I'm still going to continue it. Although I've had to take a little pause. And I need to get more people to help organize, I realize. But the Jackrabbit reading series it's a poetry emotion too. So I wrote here, I said, the poetry is in the act of gathering as much as it is in the poems themselves. The poetry happens between us and the land. So, the people came to read poems on the site, and you can see in the background here, you can see the yellow pine solar. This is the fence in the background. These big machineries are here, like getting ready to bulldoze everything. And it was so out of the ordinary, right? This is something so unusual. It was, you don't normally have a poetry reading at a solar site, in a landscape that's being destroyed. And it was very powerful. And again, that's what poetry does. Poetry takes us in new places. It opens up new worlds. And it's the gathering. So us coming and gathering here, that's the poetry emotion. This is Claire Vay Watkins. She's a fantastic Mojave Desert writer. There's another picture of Claire. But I had the Jackrabbit reading series took place in different spots all around the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. This is this is one of the last ones that we had, and it was a really huge turnout. And this is when we built the mitzvah, which I'm going to show you in a minute here. And this is Matthew Lavis. Matthew Lavis is a Chemehuevi elder. He's a very widely respected and well-known member of the Chemehuevi tribe. And he came to speak to us about the Salt Song Trail. So the Salt Song Trail is a physical trail that goes around the American Southwest, and actually, interestingly, is
right here at Mount Charleston, this is actually kind of the center of it. It's a physical trail, and the song is telling about water resources and other resources along the trail, but it's also a spiritual trail. So it's a spiritual and physical trail through a physical and spiritual landscape. And he came and gave a wonderful talk about what that is. And this is our mitzvah that we built. I'm gonna go show this to you. But we built this wonderful rock pile outside the yellow pine fence line. And the word mitzvah comes from the Old Testament, and it means a watching place. And it's also a border between two properties. And it's a place where everyone can see everyone else and where God can see everyone too. So we built this rock pile, this mitzvah on outside the Yellow Pine Solar Facility on what would be, unfortunately, the Purple Sage energy site, but that we want to protect. This is also on the Purple Sage energy site. I call this the Council of Yucca. These are like ancient Yucca elders in a circle, and you can just tell they're like talking to one another, and you can just feel the wisdom that they have there. I can feel it. So thanks for listening. You can check out my website, mojavegreen.org, where I've got more photos and videos. You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. But for more specific information and for current updates on specific solar facilities and ways to take action and get involved, please look at the website basinandrangewatch2.org. So let's just take a minute here and maybe go over to the mitzvah while we still have a tiny bit of light.
Okay, here we are out here just after sunset. And this is the mitzvah that we built, the rock pile that we built at the edge of the Yellow Pine Solar Facility. There are no solar panels right in this area, as you can see. So we built this to mark a boundary between the old way of doing things, which is business as usual, and what we believe to be the new way. Here is its plaque, and I'll read to you the poem on here. So I wrote, "With this rock pile, we honor the 92,000 Mojave yucca and 500,000 creosote being destroyed at the Yellow Pine Solar Site. We honor the 130 desert tortoises taken from their burrows and the 33 killed. We honor the soil. We honor the rocks. We honor the lichen and moss. We honor the kit fox. We honor the birds. We honor the insects. We honor the coyote. We honor the human. We honor the cholla and the barrel cactus and the unknown. With this rock pile, we form a sacred pact with the living valley. To destroy nature is the old way. With this rock pile, we enter a new way of being." So that's it, everyone. I just want to thank you so much for your attention, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. So please get in touch if you have any questions or if you'd like to chat, and take care.